I'll repeat my thanks for having the idea of this wonderful conference, which is in honor of the result that Gross-Zagier proved many years ago, but it's of course also in honor of Dick Gross himself. And of course he's not here. And I want to say just, well, first of all, make a general personal remark. Those of you who grew up in the United States will know what the illusion is, but I'm feeling that this whole conference like Rip Van Winkle. So if you didn't grow up in America, you don't maybe know who Rip Van Winkle is. There's similar people in Japanese and Chinese mythology, but it's like you did in another country far away for many years, and suddenly you're back. But then you feel it's the next day, but actually 100 years have gone past. And everything has changed, and you're very old, and everybody is very young. And that's exactly what I feel like here in these lectures, most of which are way above my head, which claim to be somehow coming from the Gross-Zagier Formula. I'm half of the Gross-Zagier, but I certainly can't follow most of what I'm hearing. But that's normal. I'm 75. You don't expect to understand everything. Although in my defense house, didn't understand everything. I was younger. So that's one comment. Actually, I feel very nostalgic here anyway, because I'm an MIT alumnus. I studied here, and I was very young when I came to college. I arrived a week before semester started because the plane was too expensive to come live at it. So I arrived with my suitcases. I was 15, just barely turned 15, small, still pretty small, and totally lost. I'd never been away from home before. And I took a taxi, suddenly arrived in front of the main building of MIT, asked people where it is. It was completely empty. It was a summer vacation, and I wandered through the halls with my suitcase. I found the janitor and asked where senior house was, which was my dorm. And he was able to tell me. And so today, as I walk here each day from the hotel, I walk past through Ames Street, and I thought, wait a second, senior house was in Ames Street, and I found it is still there. Of course, I don't remember it at all. So this is nostalgic memories for me, just being back in MIT. So, just a few words about the Gross-Zagier Formula. I'm saying Zagier, people keep asking how to pronounce my name. Anything is fine, it depends who's talking, in which country, and when. So today I'll say Zagier. So, it's legitimately called the Gross-Zagier Formula because we wrote a paper, we did prove it together. I can't deny that. But there were three main parts. And by far the most important was the idea, the concept. And this was not joint work at all. This was completely Dick Gross. He had been talking about this song, which I think it was 1982, with Brian Birch, thinking about the Birch-Spinetta conjecture. And then developed a very specific conjecture, but it wasn't 100% specific. He didn't know the full formula, but relating Hager points on X0 of n, which he knew, which actually were worked on to some extent by Birch, to first derivatives of certain bracket L functions. And we were already quite good friends by that time. This was 1982. I'd forgotten the details, how I met him and when, but he wrote a beautiful article that if you haven't read it, you absolutely should. It's called Working with John. He wrote it for a special volume for my 70th birthday. And it's like 4 pages, and he tells how the joint work started and how we first met, which was 5 years earlier in Corvallis at a conference. And he writes that he was very disgruntled because he was 1 year older than me, but he was still a graduate student when we met, and I was already a distinguished visiting professor. In the fall, I was in Harvard, and I was asked me to participate in his thesis defense. So I actually was on the jury for Dick's thesis defense, and we both remember that I didn't understand much, but I made one useful comment about Gross's Q-curves that many of you have heard of. He had a very complicated abstract definition, and I said, don't you just mean that the elliptic curve can be put in, I forget what form, y squared equals x cubed plus something, where something divides something. And he said, of course not, this is a sophisticated thing, you can't just. And then he thought for a minute and he said, yeah, actually it is the same. So our first interaction was that he was thinking at a very, very high mathematical level, which I couldn't do then and never could. But then I was much more concrete with formulas, and it worked out beautifully. So in September '82, he had this idea, and he came to Maryland, where he was a professor at Brown at the time. I was in Maryland. and he spent a week with my partner. Put him up, and we worked every day, all day, and most of the night, and worked out parts of his formula. And that story I'd forgotten, but I looked it up last night. He tells it really beautifully. It's a wonderful article, very few lessons it was. And so, of course, it's about Hegel points. And Hegel points live on the Jacobian XR of n, where n certainly should be bigger than 1. We want a non-trivial Jacobian. And the weight of the modular forms is 2. So he explained to me what he wanted. And you would have to be able to construct some kind of a rank and L function to hold more projection, all kinds of things. And I said, it's impossible, I can't do that. But he claims that he tricked me into being willing to try. But then I insisted, okay, well, you want n bigger than 1 and k equal to 2. I'm sorry, the weight equal to 2. But let's do higher weight and level 1 is the art. Well, he said, but that's not interesting. It doesn't matter. It's much easier. If it works there, we can work our way back. And so that's eventually what happened. And he tells us during the week we found bits of the formula. And then one night we realized after some comment he had made that the coefficients that were occurring had to have something to do with the valuation of the J function in the simplest case, if you went back to k equals 2. And so then we thought this can't be right, because it would imply that the difference of singular moduli factor. And singular moduli had been studied for 100 years. There were extensive tables going back to 1927. And nobody had ever said this, even as a numerical observation, as a theorem. So we thought that can't be right, it's much too nice. But of course we checked it and it was right, and people just had never thought of subtracting those numbers and look at they factored. So since that's been mentioned in many of the talks here, starting with Mike Dows's, the original version of the Hegel point story was when there aren't any Hegel points, when the left is 1, and when it's just the J function, where we of course already know. So that's just a few vague historical remarks.